practice makes perfect, babe. That's one thing for sure. Be a happy guinea pig. I'll only ask for more.
I think I started playing when I was about 13 or 14, and then that led into my first band when I was about 16, and that was a psychobilly band called the Ratmen. I made one record for Nervous Records in '88 or '89, and that was the first record I did. And then I played in a couple of blues bands. And then in '95, I started the band I was in the longest called the Seatsniffers from Antwerp, Belgium. And I did that for 16 years, almost 17 years. We made 7 records and we played all over Europe and a good little bit of the US too. And then I started my current band, and my current band is Broes The Mercenaries. And I've been doing that for a while. I made one record with that band called Moving Up. And now in September, there's gonna be a new single out on Sleazy Records in Spain. And that's it in very short. I was born in 1970, so I was a teenager in the 80s. And the thing that I liked about that is that not just rockabilly, but a lot of roots music from the 40s and the 50s and the early 60s got recycled in the 80s. There was a ska revival, there was cowpunk, the Sex Pistols meets country and western, Jason and the Scorchers. There was punky rhythm and blues from like Barnes Whitfield and the Savages. And there was the whole rockabilly revival, and there were bands like the Cramps. There was Psychobilly, there was neo-Rockabilly, and a whole, there was even like a short neo-swing and neo-jazz thing in the 80s. And the thing I liked about it growing up is that it kind of came from the punk scene, like the post-punk thing. And it was alternative music, and it wasn't pop music, so you could be a rebel and play good music and play it with a bit of a punky edge. And that's what I liked about, being a kid in the 80s. There's a lot of exciting stuff going on, and there was, I knew roots music from my dad. He's got a great record collection. He's got a lot of like blues and some country and some jump blues and a lot of jazz, a little bit of rockabilly. And for me, it was totally fun to see that music, coming back in the 80s, but made for me, like a young kid, and with a little bit of an exciting punk edge about it and a new wave edge about it. And that's, I thought that was very interesting because it wasn't retro. I don't like the retro word actually, because I think, if somebody plays bebop jazz or big band jazz, you're not going to call them retro. If somebody plays classical music, they're not retro, They just play classical music. Well, I play rhythm and blues and rock and roll and rockabilly. I live in the 2000s, I'm a modern guy, I think. But I don't necessarily like the retro tag too much. That music can live on without being some kind of a museum thing,
Listen to me, baby.
Where are we going musically? I don't know. And I don't care. Because that's the wonderful thing about music is that we're sitting on a gigantic reservoir of beautiful music. If you're interested in books, you're going to read a lot of classics in a lot of different languages and from a lot of different places and a lot of different writers. And you can totally go back in history, And that's what I do with music. Like most of my record collection is from before I was born, from before 1970. And that's most of what I listen to. I don't really listen to the radio. And I think people are a little too obsessed with now when it comes to music, because in different art forms, you can totally be an artist or an art student or an art enthusiast without following the trend that, you know, launched this month or this year, or what's going to be hot next year, be it, you know, painting or literature or architecture or whatever. There are trends, but you don't have to follow them, you know? And if you look at like people who've had a career and are still interesting now, playing all kinds of music, they don't care. They do their own thing, and that's a big reason why they're interesting, you know? I even think that too many people are following trends instead of thinking, I want to make my own artistic statement, you know? And when it comes to the rock and roll scene, you know, I'm not much of a scene person. I like the people in the scene, but I have friends all over the place, you know? And one thing that's a bit of a shame, if you look at the international rock and roll scene, is that there's not too many young people coming in. Like, we're getting older. And that's not bad, but you know, it gets you to think that maybe someday it's going to be over, or it's going to be smaller, or whatever. But something will happen, probably, you know. I mean, if I look at here, I see more young people than I do at home. And if you go to like California, you see from the Hispanic side, you see a lot more young people than you do in Texas. So there's hope, you know. And like I said, you know, trends and contemporary music, who cares? There's so much good music from like every decade that discovering that you're gonna need 4 lifetimes, you know? So who cares about what's on the radio, you know?